little story that kind of is what spurred this on. I mean, many of you have heard me say this before, but I don't have to look for a topic. The topic finds me. Not that I've been doing this all that long, but to date, that's how it's been working. And so what got this on, this is how recent this topic came up for me. Last weekend, I believe it was, we had a fellow come show up at the church before everybody else got here. It was basically just security and staff, stuff like that, and folks hadn't started pouring in yet. And he wanted to speak to the pastor, but he seemed to only speak Spanish. So they called Jaime, put him on the phone to translate, and Jaime's like, "That's Italian." So I speak a little French and a tiny little bit of Italian, just because I travel to Europe every year for work. So I was called over. That's why I was involved in it. And he asked me, he's like, "You speak Italian?" I'm like, "Eh." So I walk up to the guy. Now, the two possible things I could have said, I picked the totally worst one. I should have said, "Mi dispiace, io capisco un po' l'italiano, ma non molto bene." Basically being, I understand a little Italian, but not very well, right? That's how I should have led. But instead, I just said, "Tu parli l'italiano?" And he's like, "Si," and blah, 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 you know, he was rattling, you know, they talk fast. And just everything going over my head. I'm missing most of what he's saying, trying to remember how do you say slower, please. You know, and then I was like, okay, just quit. Don't even think about talking back, just listen. And I could just pick these little pieces out, mi famiglia mangiare, so my family needs to eat. You know, little things like that. They were in a van. So we could tell from that he was asking for help and they were in need. But he's not the point of the story. He's a springboard into my mind on where this came from. And that'll all make sense here in a minute. So there's this one situation that happened to me probably 2 or 3 months ago now. I was in Walmart grocery shopping over in Crossville. And I pay, and I'm on my way out with a full cart. Right as I step out of the door, you know, right where the Girl Scout cookie table would be and the folks that are trying to nab you right when you walk out the door, was a guy that otherwise looked able-bodied, you know, said, "Excuse me, sir, I'm trying to get some help buying a sleeping bag." And my default reaction as just an American man, work for what you got, you know, rugged individualist type, that kind of secular side of me, my first reaction was, "Get a job, bum." I didn't say that. Saying that was the improper first reaction, so I just thought, "Sorry, I don't have any cash," and I just kept going. Like, nope, you. And I said, this is not the proper reaction, so I'm the bad guy right up front. Not look at me, how great I was. And at the end of this, you'll see how I'm a total failure. But as I'm walking toward my car, like I could feel this finger poking me in the chest. And I literally heard the words, "What you do for the least of these." And I literally out loud said the words, "Yes, Lord," and started to turn around, and I realized, I got to get rid of this cart. So I rushed to my car as fast as I could, emptied out everything in the car, locked it, threw the buggy in a cart return, and made a beeline back to where I saw this guy. Because I'm thinking this now, I'm like, I feel like I was commanded to turn around and go get that guy's sleeping bag. Like I said, that wasn't me. That wasn't me being kind of heart. I feel like I was being told. So all the way back, I'm thinking to myself, he just wanted a soft, warm place to sleep. That's all he wanted. That's all he was asking for. He wasn't asking for money. And I just immediately blew him off. Kept going on my happy way with my huge shopping cart full of food that anybody in his situation would have did anything to have. So I get back and he's not there. I'm like, oh, now I feel like a total failure. Like, oh, I was supposed to help this guy and I didn't. Now he's gone. Well, I'm going to go buy a sleeping bag anyway, and then I'm going to drive around this place till I find him. So I did. I went straight back to the sleeping bag section, got one that was seasonally appropriate, like a 40-degree bag or something. And I'm heading back up front to pay, and there he comes. And he sees me, and he sees that I have a sleeping bag now. And I'm like, oh, hey, there you are. I said, I realized I don't need cash. I've got a card. I can pay for this with that. And he pulls out a 20. I guess somebody else had helped him out with a little. He said, I got $20 to put towards it. So he really did want a sleeping bag. He wasn't, trying to hit me up for cash. He was going to hand me that 20 to pay for part of it. It's probably $40 total. And I was like, nah, keep it. That kind of validated his sincerity in my mind. So we go up to the register. I pay for it, hand him the receipt, hand him the bag, and wish him well and move on. I'll get to why I'm a total failure later. But so anyway, what you did for the least of these, you did for me, has kind of been whirling around in my head ever since that moment. So that this weekend, when we had somebody show up at the church asking for help, that was a springboard to that memory and kind of prompted this subject. So, if you got your Bible and you want to open it and follow along, we're obviously going to be in Matthew 25, 31 through 46, parable of the sheep and goats. So I'll give you a minute to look there, but while you're looking it up, I'm going to talk about the context and the scenario here. This was part of the Olivet Discourse, which was basically Jesus' one of his final teachings, just days before the crucifixion, probably the most important Wednesday of all human history. He knew his arrest was near. He knew his ministry was ending. And he also knew his disciples were clearly confused and unprepared for what was to come. So he had kind of a sense of urgency to get some really main points across to the disciples, and in the form of a parable, so that they could easily also carry that forward in the writings for us to be able to use today. And when they reached the Mount of Olives, the disciples privately asked him, "When will these things happen? What will be the sign of your coming? And what will be the signs of the end of the age?" And they were expecting, when all they had been taught as Jews their whole life, they were expecting an immediate messianic kingdom, national restoration of Israel, and Rome's defeat. That's what they had all been ready for. And instead, he's telling them they're about to face persecution, turmoil, false messiahs. They're going to be a worldwide gospel proclamation, a long season of waiting, and then a final decisive return. So not quite what they wanted to hear. And they couldn't grasp everything that was going to happen. So, he packaged it well in these three parables. So, if anybody is familiar with Matthew 25, you get the parable of the 10 virgins, the parable of the talents, which I covered actually a month or so ago, I think. And then to round it all off, the parable of the sheep and goats. So, just a quick summary of the first two parables so we can kind of put the whole lesson together here with the sheep and the goats. The parable of the 10 virgins was all about being ready, because you don't know when the return is going to happen. The whole thing was based on Jewish tradition. And if you really dig into that and you really see how when the man goes away, when the bridegroom goes away to build his home, usually at his father's house, the father is the one that says, "Okay, you're ready, go get her." Only the father knows. There's so many things that just link up there when you really dig into it. But the end result was there were 5 wise virgins and 5 foolish ones who weren't prepared. They didn't have oil for their lamps, and in the end, they came back to a closed door and "I do not know you." So the point of that one is we need to always be ready. We don't know when it's going to happen, so be vigilant and be prepared. And then the parable of the talents, like I said, we covered a few weeks ago, was all about the master leaving behind, large sums of money, or a really large sum, a fairly large, and then a somewhat large sum to 3 different people, and then what they did with it. So that one taught us about being faithful, and being good keepers of what God has entrusted you with, whether it's your abilities, opportunities, talents, resources, finances, and how there will be accountability for how you handle what He's given you. Then the parable of the sheep and goats. So this is the one we're actually going to dig into. I just wanted to catch us all up on the chapter 25 here to get the full context in. So, starting with verse 31, Matthew 25, verse 31. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put his sheep on his right, and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, you are blessed of my Father. Inherit the kingdom which has been prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, and feed you, or thirsty, and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger, and invite you in, or naked, and clothe you? And when did we see you sick, or in prison, and come to you? And the king will answer them and say, Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me. So let's pause there for a second before we go on to verse 41. And other than what you did for the least of them, you did to me, that's fairly clear cut. But if we back up to verse 37, the righteous were confused. Like, when did we see you and do these things? You can see that the righteous, they weren't keeping score. They weren't out trying to rack up works and good deeds and being seen doing good deeds. They didn't need to know that the king wasn't watching to do the right thing. They didn't need to think it was the king before them to do the right thing, because they knew the love of the king, and the love of the king was in their hearts, and they lived their lives appropriately and accordingly. So when a situation arose, they responded the way their king would. In our case, Christ. If we have Christ in our hearts and we walk with Christ every day, when we come across these situations, like me with the guy that just wanted a sleeping bag, you do the right thing. Now, I was a failure in that point because I had to be told to do it. That wasn't out of the goodness of my heart. But when someone needs help, we should want to help them. Everything in my life that I have was given to me. I didn't earn any of it. Any talent I have, any motivations I've had, whether they be negative motivations that push me forward or positive motivations, every opportunity, my health, abilities, everything that I have and everything I've ever earned is a gift from God and a gift from Christ. So if it's not mine in the first place and it all belongs to Him, who am I to not share that with someone who desperately needs it? Like a man just looking for a soft, warm place to sleep, who's clearly going to be sleeping outside that night. What is that to me with all the gifts that I've been given? And that's how the people that He separated as the sheep were living their lives, And think, it's not just about giving money. It's not just about slipping somebody $20 if they ask you for money. How many of you, because you're living Christ-like and you have Christ in your heart, have mowed the lawn for a neighbor, fixed a neighbor's car, invited somebody over for the holidays who had lost their spouse and they were going to be alone, and even if it wasn't someone you would normally have over to your house, you knew they needed it, so you did it anyway because you were being Christ-like. Right? You didn't, in that moment when you invited that person over, you didn't have to sit and think, am I being seen doing this? Am I getting credit for this? Am I marking up points? Is this going into my works file so I can work my way to heaven? You weren't thinking that way when you did those things. You did it because you had the love of Christ in your heart and you were being Christ-like. You were shining His light for others to see. So now let's move on to verse 41. Then He will also say to those on His left, Depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they themselves will answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty? Or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you? Then he will answer them, saying, Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. Now it's basically the same excuse, right? Except it's coming from a totally different direction this time. Their Lord, when did we see you hungry? Was more of a, but if I knew it was you, I would have done it. Right? And they clearly weren't walking with the love of their King. They weren't walking with the love of Christ in their daily lives. And they were just going about their business. And they turned their backs to people in need. They walked right by that guy asking for a sleeping bag. They just didn't have somebody poking him in the chest to turn him around like I did. And that was just the pattern of their lives. You know, and one thing I think of, this is just a side note, but one thing I think of with that is, you all know as well as I do, one of the biggest detractors for a lot of people from coming to church in the United States especially is what people consider the hypocrisy of the church. Now, people go to church on Sunday and, you know, they wear their best clothes and they put on their best behavior, but then the rest of the week they're a different person. You know, that is a problem. That is a thing. And that is kind of like what I see in this group. You know, if they knew they were going to get credit for doing something, they would have did it. But hey, this is Tuesday. I go to church on Sunday. Not today, buddy. This is Tuesday. You know, I'll be a Christian again on Sunday. You know, that's how a lot of people live. And I'm not saying anybody in here is doing that. Clearly, you're here on a Wednesday night, so you're living it. But just imagine kind of the negative ministry that has. You know, imagine the negative ministry it would have when the Italian gentleman showed up on our doorstep asking for help if we turned him away. Just imagine if you were a Christian, and I believe he was, because he said a very long prayer in Italian. But imagine you're a Christian, you're traveling across the country, you're trying to get to, maybe you've got family somewhere, where you were coming from, just your life fell apart there, and you just, okay, I've got my uncle in Florida, I just got to get to Florida. And along the way, you have flat tires, you have a transmission go out. There's just things that happen that drain your funds. And then you just don't have the money to keep going. And you stop and ask a church, one of your fellow Christians, and you ask them for help, and they, and just turn you away. We don't do that. Come back on Monday. You know, how would that feel? And even if the guy was a scammer, what kind of negative ministry would that be to someone who we hope comes to Christ someday? To show them that we're not better than anybody else, that we turn a blind eye to people who are in need. We don't want to be putting out a negative ministry like that, and we don't want to, in our own personal lives, not be Christ-like at all times, like He clearly is ordering us to be. So, back to why I believe I was a complete failure, even though I bought that guy a sleeping bag. After I gave him the sleeping bag, I handed him a receipt in case he needed to take it back for whatever reason. Or he was in the store with me, so I guess so he wouldn't be accused of stealing it. I think was more my thought. I just kind of rushed away. You know, hey, have good. Out the door I went. And as I was walking out the door, it's like I was getting poked in the chest again. I had an opportunity to explain to that guy that he had a sleeping bag because Jesus wanted it, not me. I felt that tall. So any good that I thought I might have done was completely gone in that moment. I mean, he had a warm, soft place to sleep that night. But I had the opportunity to witness to him and show the love of Christ. I messed it up. walked away, trying to get away from that uncomfortable situation as fast as I could, instead of making it like it was a precious moment and not preaching to him, but witnessing to him. That's it. Obviously, it breaks my heart to this day. That haunts me. That moment haunts me to this day. So, everybody has a ministry. It's not just him. It's not just the people who teach. It's not just the worship group. And I've probably said this multiple times. Everybody has a ministry, and your most important ministry that each of us have is how we live our lives every day. How do people in the rest of the world see you living your life? Are you Christ-like? Or are you a hypocrite that makes them think, what's the point of going to church? They're no better than the rest of us. You know? And even if that guy was a scammer. There was one time early in me and my wife's relationship, still just dating at the time, we stopped at a gas station, and they came up to me and asked me for gas money. And, kind of similar story. Oh, me and my wife were traveling to we're out on this, so I'm give him $20. That's all I had in my pocket. And somebody we were with, I think we were with another couple, oh, he's just a scammer. They just go around from pump to pump asking for money. And for a minute I thought, yeah, he probably was. I probably just got had. And then my wife, who was just my girlfriend at the time, fiance, she said, so what? That's between him and God. I was like, right. We can't go around trying to vet every person that seems like they're in need. If we turn people away because they might be a scammer, then we're right back up to, but I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. We're goats when we do that. I want to be on the right side. I want to be a sheep. I want to be a goat. And this is a very clear-cut command from Jesus as to how we're supposed to treat people in need. And, so if they're obviously a scammer, don't let yourself get played. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying just hand money to everybody that asks you for it. I was in Memphis not long ago for work, probably a year or so ago. I was standing downtown at a hotel downtown and walking out to get something to eat. This guy comes up to me, says he's hungry, needs something to eat, asks me for money. I give him some money. I'm like, even I knew that was probably 95% chance that one was a scam, but okay, whatever. And the very next night, I'm walking down the same street to go to dinner. The exact same guy comes up and hits me up for money and didn't remember me for the night before. And I was just like, I gave you money last night, So if you don't be a fool, but be loving. Err on the side of you're loaning money to Jesus. You're giving money to Jesus, And speaking of that, Proverbs 19:17, he who is gracious to the poor and lends to Yahweh, and he will repay him for his bountiful deeds. What you do for the poor, you're doing for God. You're not just doing it for the poor. They're the immediate beneficiary of it. But what you have is from God. What you give to the poor is for God. And that's how Jesus sees it, and that's how I want to live it. I've not always lived up to that. But yeah, that case of the sleeping bag at Walmart, that haunts me every day. The missed opportunity I had that I could have told that guy why he has that sleeping bag. I met some nice guy and he gave me a sleeping bag. That wasn't 1/10 of 1% of the story. The whole story was that Jesus wanted him to have that. Here a couple minutes early since we didn't have the song.